I was in a taxi the other day, taking a ride from town to the airport, and as often is the case, the taxi driver had some really good local information to share. I learned Aberdeen is in fact the final resting place of the man who was steering the Titanic when it hit an iceberg. His subsequent story is really something of a tragedy. In the past, he's been labelled as the man who sunk the Titanic, but how true is that? Robert Hichens was one of 7 quartermasters aboard the unsinkable ship when it sunk. He was at home at sea. He had previously worked as a fisherman and served in the Royal Navy. He was a man at the peak of his career. So how was it that he copped the blame for the death of more than 1,500 people? In 1912, on the Titanic's maiden voyage, the ship struck an iceberg. It was Hichens that was at the helm. Reports state that he tried to steer the ship away, but was too late. Ultimately, the impact sunk the vessel. Accusations were made that he had in fact steered the ship in the wrong direction. However, this isn't backed up by the inquiries into the sinking, nor by people who were there. In fact, the Titanic's second and first officers both stated that Hichens acted correctly. It's important to remember the sinking of the Titanic was a huge tragedy, featuring in headlines around the globe. When it comes to things like mass death, people want straightforward answers. They want someone to blame. So inevitably, that fell on Hichens. But as it stands, he probably had very little to do with the initial impact. Realistically, too much faith was placed in the Titanic in this concept of being unsinkable. And we well and truly know that now. No ship is unsinkable. If you ever find yourself wandering through a historic cemetery, you're more than likely to come across somebody that's perished in a shipwreck somewhere. That's part of why in New Zealand they refer to drowning as the New Zealand death, because lots of people drowned at sea and also in the waterways that are everywhere. The fact that he was steering the Titanic isn't the only reason he's had so much heat thrown his way. As the Titanic began to sink, Hichens took charge of lifeboat number 6. We can only really imagine the chaos that must have been going on. It's fair to say the 1997 blockbuster movie Titanic has painted Hichens in a pretty negative light. In this and other depictions, he's often portrayed as somebody that's refusing to return to pick up more survivors. Pretty much shown as someone that was more interested in saving his own skin than that of others. But reality is likely a little different. Passenger of the number 6 lifeboat, Molly Brown, is reported to have been aggressively trying to encourage Hichens to go back to pick up survivors, to which he refused. She really cemented this negative image of Hichens when she went to the papers and said he was a coward and a bully. She asserted that he had no idea which way to go. The millionaire Margaret Molly Brown had a lot of sway with the opinions of people. But there's some pretty important facts to consider here. Firstly, Molly Brown was not a seasoned sailor, and Hichens was. You'll have probably been in a stressful situation before where someone thinks they know what they're doing but probably doesn't really have much clue. And then amplify that by hundreds of people drowning, bitter cold, and a massive sense of impending doom. It's chaos. It's quite understandable that people in the boat may have felt like what was happening was not right and that there were people that needed to be saved. But there's limited space in a boat. This is just a reality. On top of that, Robert Hichens had been given a direct order to take those people in that boat to safety and drop them off and then return. And that's exactly what he was doing. It said that the lifeboat had a capacity of 65, but only had 24 people aboard it when it was picked up, so that likely didn't help much either. Reality is, we will never know exactly what happened. No cell phones back in those days to record all of the goings on. In the years that followed, Hichens really struggled. He became a heavy drinker and had what we now know is some pretty severe PTSD. Unsurprisingly, he struggled to get work. Not a lot of people wanted to sail with him. His reputation was in tatters, his career completely destroyed, And probably not a lot of people were that interested in his side of the story, whether it was true or not. In the 1930s, Hichens was imprisoned for 4 years for attempted murder after he had a dispute over some money. He ended up acquiring a gun and shooting a man named Harry Henley. He was released in 1937. Hichens worked as a third mate of a cargo ship during the Second World War, transporting coal over to Africa. In 1940, the ship was docked in Aberdeen, and one of the crewmen went to check on Hichens and found that he had died from heart failure. His family initially thought he'd been buried at sea, and it wasn't until 2012 that they actually found that he was interred at Trinity Cemetery in Aberdeen. He was given a pauper's burial, communal, no grave marker, but there is now a memorial with an epitaph that commemorates the life of Robert Hichens. I'm always really fascinated by the stories of those that are interred in cemeteries. If you're fascinated by history, cemeteries are an excellent place to go looking for it. You don't have to actually dig. You can just dig through archives or even through YouTube. I'll certainly be making more content on it, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see more of that. And leave a comment if there's something in particular that you want to see covered. If you're interested in more of my work on cemeteries, make sure to check out the link in the description. And of course, there'll be the video suggestions popping up.